Hey everyone, we are back in my basement. It's Micah. How are you all today? I've actually been down here in my basement for most of the day, so forgive me if I start going a little crazy. But yeah, we're back in the basement getting ready to do some fun stuff on AWS, building some projects with Go. Uh, and if you're joining for the first time, we've been kind of going through the paces of learning a little bit about Go, starting with Hello World, and then starting to try to build a Lambda function with Go and deploying it onto AWS. So we've done some basics, and then we started building a generative AI based uh, poem generator. So building poems or generating poems inspired by artwork. That's been pretty fun. And last week we got it all working, but we realized that could could wind up being very expensive and not super fast. So we shared some ideas, which I'll go over in a little bit, about how we can deal with that. And so today we're going to try it, see if we can um, make things a little bit more cost effective and a little bit more performant, uh, and see how far we can get. I'll be honest, I am going to be going a little bit more by the seat of my pants today. The last couple sessions, I've had quite a few notes to lean on. This time, we're just going to figure stuff out as we go. But I have a few ideas. And to start things off, hang on, let me just bring up what we were doing last time. Just a sec. There we go. Actually, let's close this first so you can see it a little bit better. So yeah, this is our architecture we were working on last time. Uh, and that, in fact, it's a little bit simpler than this at the moment. So just to kind of recap, what we've built so far is really just this API gateway here and this Lambda function. Uh, so requests come into our API gateway, which hits our Lambda function, and our Lambda function, which is written in Go, calls the Cleveland Museum of Art Open Access API. It gets some information about an artwork we specify in the query string of our request. And then it uses that artwork document to craft a prompt that we send to Amazon Bedrock uh, to use Anthropic Claude to generate a poem inspired by the, the, uh, the description of that artwork. Last time we chose to switch to Claude Instant, which is a little bit faster and significantly cheaper. So that's pretty cool, but we're still making requests every time and generating a new poem every time someone makes a request. So in the last session, we talked a bit about how to um, kind of set up a cache. We talked about CloudFront as a cache, and then I added the idea of saving the poems to disk. So in today's session, we're going to look into how to write that data to DynamoDB and how to refactor our code a bit to first check for the poem in DynamoDB, and if it's not there, generate one using this whole workflow here and save the new one to disk to DynamoDB. So hopefully, if we get that all working, it will mean that subsequent requests for the same artwork or the same poem uh, will be much faster. You'll just have to read it from DynamoDB rather than generate the whole poem every time. And there's a number of things we can do to invalidate those poems when they get stale, like over some period of time. If that seems to be interesting, we could do that. But with DynamoDB, we can also set up more functionality with the API, so we can do things like searching for different poems. We could do I don't know, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, let's get into it. Let me just bring up. I do have a few notes here, not just nothing here. So yeah, let's take a look at our code and sort of get a sense of where things are. I want to refactor things a little bit, I think. And I want to show you some cool toys to play with as well, um, that I've been having a lot of fun with lately. So yeah, let me bring up VS Code. Good old VS Code. All right, let me just make sure that looks pleasant for everyone. You know what? I want to be over here. That's better. That looks pretty good. Everything else looks cool. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, let's start from scratch here. So this is our project. Same thing we were working on last time. I haven't really done anything to it since then. And it's really simple. So there's one Lambda function. It's called main.go. Lives inside this folder called generate poem function. Uh, and we have one package. So last time we learned about making Go packages. So we created a separate package just for the function that grabs that artwork from Cleveland Museum of Art. So that's cool. And then in the main function, or in the Lambda function, we started to separate things out into separate functions. So we have a craft prompt function now, that takes the poem. I'm sorry, that takes the artwork data and sort of inserts it into some other text to create a prompt for Bedrock. And we can make this more sophisticated if we want. We'll see if we get to that. And then we created a separate send prompt to Bedrock function. So this does a bunch of stuff. This loads up the config to communicate with AWS, creates a service for the Bedrock runtime. Then it sort of sets up all the parameters. So there's a number of uh, headers we send along with the particular Bedrock model we want to use. We're going to be using Claude Instant. And then it crafts that prompt. So there's a number of parameters for the prompt itself. And then we send it. And then once we get a response, we unmarshal that response from Bedrock, and send back as a return just the completion part. Cool. Then lastly, or most importantly really, is the handler function. So this does all the work. Basically, this is what each step of the process. So we grab that query string from the request, and I'll talk a little bit more about some details we might want to think about here in a moment. Then we use that ID to get an artwork from the museum just by using that Cleveland art function that we created in that package. Then we do the craft prompt stuff, and then we send it to Bedrock. We're logging the poem, just printing it out. So that will, when you print things in Lambda from Go, it'll wind up in the CloudWatch logs. So we're doing that. And then we're returning the whole poem. So just the whole uh, completion from Bedrock at the moment, along with the status code. Cool. So yeah, so what I want to do today, so I want to add in the DynamoDB bit, right? So basically what we want to do is, instead of immediately generating a poem or grabbing a poem from Cleveland even, we want to first check in the database and see if we already have one. And then if we do, we just want to return it directly. If we don't, then we want to go through the whole process. And then before we return the poem, we're going to write it to the database as well, so we have it for next time. So that's what we're trying to do. So what I'm going to do first, to kind of get started, is just write that out as comments here. You can write them out as like to-dos or whatever, but so we can remember to do them. But let's just figure out how that fits into our current flow here. So we still have to grab that ID. That's the first step. That doesn't change. But instead of asking Cleveland Museum of Art for that artwork right away, we want to check if we already have a poem in the database. So let's call that, oops, let's turn that off for a second. Yeah, let's pause this. I'm going to come back to that in a second because I have something to talk about around Code Whisperer. Okay, so we're going to do that. Check if we already have a poem in the database. If we don't, I'm sorry, if we do, let's just say like, if we have a poem, return it to API gateway. And if we don't, we're going to do this whole process again. But then when we get to the log the poem part, maybe like right after we log the poem, we can also write poem to database, and then we'll return it just as before. So that's pretty simple. Yeah, we're really just checking if we already have one. If we've got it, return it. If not, everything else is the same, except we also want to write it to the database for next time. So that's what we're going to try to do. So before we do that, before we get into writing code, I want to talk a little bit about Code Whisperer, Amazon Code Whisperer, and Amazon Q. So there's a few tools I've been working with lately to kind of help me write code. They're super handy. And there's sort of three areas where these come into play. So if you have the AWS plugin for VS Code, you can set this up. You can connect to Code Whisperer and Amazon Q. Code Whisperer is basically a coding assistant, right? So you just saw it kind of pop up there for a second. So I'll turn it back on. And so what's nice about Code Whisperer in this area in the code editor is it will just suggest things for you. So if I type like print the artwork, so it already knows what I want to do. So print the artwork, and then I return. It'll write me the statement I need to print the artwork. But it does much more than that. It'll start to sort of understand your code as you build it. So it'll suggest the things you want to do before you even kind of think of them. It was a little goofy at first for me. It was kind of hard to kind of get used to using, but once you do, it's really nice. It seems to do really well, and I've enjoyed working with it quite a bit. So I'm going to leave it on now. So if as we write our code, it'll start suggesting things, and we can either accept those suggestions or decline them and move on. But Code Whisperer winds up in your code editor as you work. So that's one. The other one is you've also got Code Whisperer command line tool now. So this, if I open up my terminal, this you have to install separately. So it's outside of the AWS plugin. You have to download an installer for your Mac, and I think it's currently only available on the Mac, but I'm sure that will change soon. But once you've installed it, what it does is it lets you type things like it kind of automatically completes things for you. So if I want to change directories, I type CD, and let's see if it's actually turned on at the moment. Okay, Code Whisperer's on. Let me just make sure it's, yeah, CW update. What am I doing wrong here? Hold on a second. Let's just, maybe I forgot to set it up before. Hold on, settings. Here we go. It looks like it's on, it is in beta. So we'll see. We'll try the CW doctor thing here. That might help us. And let's make sure it is enabled. Yes, enabled. So you can use Code Whisperer on the command line in all your terminals, including VS Code, which is where we're trying to do it now. But whatever your IDE of choice is, you can use Code Whisperer there. So let's try this again. Doctor running checks. Ooh, okay, everything looks good. All right. But it's not working. Interesting. Let me see if it's working in our terminal. Before I started the show, I was having some other issues with this computer with Docker, but that doesn't seem related. So let's just try this. I know this is very small. Oops. Okay. That's right. AI. Okay. How do I sync a file to S3? Cool. So it's just shown me the command to sync to S3. So it's working here, but it's not doing, there's like a type ahead capability that I'm not seeing. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll have to play with that another time, unless I forgot to turn something on here. Preferences. That looks correct. So this is what it's supposed to do. You're supposed to type a command, and it will give you like auto completion suggestions. But for some reason, my computer is acting a little funny today. All right, auto completion's on. Let's try it again. Cool. Okay, that's all right. We don't really need it at the moment. Let's just see if. Okay. Anyways, something's up there, so we'll file a bug report maybe. But the third one I wanted to look at is called Amazon Q. So in the AWS plugin for VS Code, you can also set up Amazon Q. And Amazon Q is basically like a little assistant in your sidebar over here. So this is super handy because you can do things like write me a Go program that uh, gets an item from DynamoDB, and it will generate an answer. I can't answer that question. Interesting. Let's put it in the form of a question. How do I write a Go program that gets an item from DynamoDB? Question mark. Oh, there we go. Finally, something worked. Look at that. Okay, cool. So I asked it to give me an example, basically, of a Go program that gets an item from Amazon DynamoDB, and this is exactly what it did. It gave me a little sample code, pretty much very similar to what we've done before. You can see it's imported the Go SDK version 2. It's setting up our config to communicate with AWS. It's creating a client. It's making a request to get an item, so on and so forth. And it's just printing out the item itself. What's kind of fun about this is that you can actually insert this right into your editor. So if this looks good to you, that this is actually the code you're looking for, you can plunk it right into your editor and test it out. You can also just copy it. But you can ask all sorts of questions, whatever you need to know, like how do I get the current Unix time in Go? And it's having some trouble at the moment. I wonder what's going on. I think I thought I had authenticated everything already before. So, okay, I'll have to look into that and try it again later. I'm not sure why it's not working at the moment. Oh well, cool. So that's okay. We can do without it as we normally would. And we'll just figure out what's going on with that later. So anyways, let's get back to this. So what we're going to try to do is figure out how to check if we have an item in the database, um, and all that stuff we just talked about. So first things first, we need to create a table in DynamoDB. So let me show you what that looks like. If you've never seen DynamoDB before, over here in the console, I can make this a bit bigger, I guess. One sec. Zoom in a little bit for you. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so let's go to DynamoDB. Let's just take a little tour. So DynamoDB is completely serverless, NoSQL database. It's awesome, does all sorts of stuff. If you go to tables, we don't currently have any tables, but you can create one right here. Um, and you can give it a name. And DynamoDB basically has this idea of a partition key. Um, this is what you use to retrieve items from your table. You can also add a sort key. Um, this is for sorting, obviously, but it also can be used to create uniqueness. So, for example, your partition key could be like a customer ID, for example, and your sort key might be an order ID. And then those two things combined might create like a unique item in your table. So there's that. There's also a bunch of settings, so you can choose to use the default settings, which we're going to play with in a minute, or you can customize all these settings. So there's the capacity mode, how many um, read capacity and write capacity units you want to use, or if you want to use on-demand mode, and then it will sort of figure that out as needed, sort of like basically auto scaling for you. And that's what we're going to do. And there's a bunch of other settings here, so you can encrypt everything. You can choose how to encrypt it. You can decide whether or not when you delete a table, if it's going to um, protect that data or not. So there's a number of different options you can choose here. Super easy to do. And I really like DynamoDB because if I'm just prototyping an idea or building a new project that I haven't really had too much time to think about, it's like the easiest thing in terms of like a place to store some data. And then if it actually does wind up scaling big, it could totally handle big scale, high availability type of workloads. So it's a really nice system to work in. And you don't have to provision anything. You don't have to like install a database or set up a server or anything. Um, all sorts of other stuff. So you can do backups, you can export and import from S3. There's a bunch of integrations it has. So yeah, we can take a look at what it can do more and more as we go. But that's DynamoDB. We're going to provision our table um, from SAM. So rather than creating the table in the console, we're going to create it in our template in SAM. So let's go open Application Composer. One sec. Okay. So here's Application Composer. And we're going to find a DynamoDB table. Here it is. We're just going to stick it here and look at its details. So you can give it a logical ID. Let's just call it poems. It's already got our partition key. It sort of guessed what our partition key is going to be. I was going to call it ID also. In terms of the data type, you can either use a string or a number in this case. I'm going to keep it a string just so we can test out a few things down the road here. But you can change it to a number if all your IDs are number values. We're not going to do a sort key for now or an expiration key, so we're just going to save that. Cool. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to, let's see, do I want to do that? No, sorry. We're just going to go back to our template and take a look at what it made. All right, so now if we go down here to the bottom, we should see our poems table. There it is. Cool. So there's our poems table. It is a DynamoDB table. It's got this attribute definition of an ID. It's a string. We're using the pay per request billing mode. So rather than provisioning, uh, uh, using provisioned mode, I guess is what it's called. We're going to just pay. We're just going to pay per request. I think that's best for a little mini project like this. And there's our key schema. We just have the single ID at the moment. And this is for setting up your DynamoDB streams later on. We're not going to get into that today, but that's a way where you can actually create like an event-driven architecture where whenever you update a table or delete an item in a table or any kind of action in the table, you can create an event from that. And then you can basically react to that event with something like another Lambda function. So that's a super powerful tool. We're not going to really get into that today, but that's something we'll definitely take a look at in the future. All right, so let's go back to here. I was I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I wonder if I draw a line from here to here, connection made between my function and poems. Let's click arrange here so it makes it look a little better. All right, so my idea here is that the Lambda function needs to be able to talk to DynamoDB, and it also needs to know the name of the table. So let's see what it did in our template. So nothing different here, but if we go up to our function, you see now there's an environment variable for our Lambda function that references the DynamoDB table. So it gives us both our table name, which we're going to need, and the table IRN. It's also created a policy which allows Lambda to access that table, to write and read from that table. So we're done. Awesome. Okay, so that's done what we needed to do. So before we write any code around this in Lambda, let's just deploy it and see if it works. All right, let's say Sam build. Now, before I started the stream, I was having some funny things going on with Sam and Docker. Hopefully those funny things are over. Let's see what happens. Make this a little bigger. Seems to be working, so we'll see. Like I said, we're a little bit more seat of the pants today. Okay, so it looks like it's working. So it's going to add our poems table, DynamoDB table. It's going to change the role for our, it's going to modify our existing role that's attached to our Lambda function. It's going to update our function because it has to update that environment variable. And it looks like we're updating our API as well. I'm not sure why we have to do that, but that's on there too. Okay, so let's do it, see what happens. So far, so good. All right, it looks like it made our table. That's good. And we're going to go and take a look at this in the console just to make sure things are working the way we want them to work. It's taking its time. All right, there we go. Function update is complete. And we're done. Great. All right, that's cool. Let's take a look at AWS. We should be able to refresh this. Oh, there it is. Cool. There's our table. Now take a look at this real quick. So the name is not just poems, it's a bunch of stuff. So it's the name of our um, application, our serverless application, plus the name of our poem our poems table, plus a code, like or kind of a randomly generated code here. This is really good because um, it won't intersect or interact with any other tables you might already have with the same naming convention. Like if you had another table called poems already in there, you'd be okay. Also, if you've got multiple environments, so with SAM, you can create like a dev, test, and prod environment, more or less. Um, you can create multiple versions of the same table, essentially. So there's a few reasons for doing it this way. And then in our SAM template, it's setting this value up in Lambda, so Lambda knows the name of this funky named table here. But if we look at the table, as you can see, there's currently no items in the table. It's completely empty, but that's it. So let's go to Lambda for a moment. Just want to see. Okay, here is our generate poems function. It's still being triggered by API Gateway, but if we go down to our configuration, we should see those two environment variables. So there's our table name, and it's called poems underscore table underscore name. So we're going to need to know that for later. And then it's also got the ARN in here, which is kind of nice. What about permissions? So if we go to permissions, we still have that bedrock permission that we put in from last time. But now if we look at this role, there should be a bunch of stuff now. So we've got our bedrock full access policy. We've got our sort of built-in Lambda basic execution role for talking to CloudWatch. We have X-ray for sending traces to X-ray, but now we also have this inline. Let's see what that is. Yeah, so it's added this role here that allows us to write and read, update, and delete into DynamoDB, but it's only going to be happening on that specific table. So it's the least permissions necessary, basically, which is good. That's a good thing. So it's done that for us. That's nice. All right, let's go back to our code editor here. Okay, so we wired up a DynamoDB table. We have it all hooked up to our Lambda function. Everything seems to be good, but our code doesn't do anything with it yet. So let's take a look at our function code. So the first thing we want to do is check if we already have a poem in the database. How do we do that? All right, so basically we have to try to get it, right, to fetch it and see if it exists. So to do that, some of the code for this is similar, I would say, to the beginning part here of Bedrock. So we need to do this configuration thing. And then we need to set up a service as well. So what I'm getting at is, I think first and foremost, let's create a new function. Oh, look, craft poem. It thinks we want to craft another poem. Okay, so what we're going to do instead is get poem. Okay, we're going to pass in an ID, and it's going to be a string for now. And look, it's got all this other stuff. It's thinking we're going to return a string or an error. Is that what we want? Yeah, actually, that is pretty much what we want at the moment. So let's leave that. So you just hit tab to accept the Code Whisperer's suggestions. So it's given us a get poem from the database, and it's just sort of stubbed out return empty string or nil for now. So that's nice. And so what we need to do, we definitely need to do this same exact function or the same exact thing right here. So I'm just going to add that like so. And then we need to create a service, except instead of it being Bedrock runtime like it's suggesting, it's going to be DynamoDB. So let's do this. You can just keep typing DynamoDB dot new from config. It should be pretty much the same. And you can see it's underlined in red at the moment. And now it's not. So what it's done up here at the top automatically for us is it's imported the DynamoDB service, but as you can see, it's underlined in red because I haven't installed it yet. So I'm going to copy this. Okay, I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to do a go get DynamoDB. And there we go. Okay, so now the red is gone. And we should be able to get a poem. What did we call? I just want to check something here. What did we call get artwork? Okay, cool. So we're being consistent. All right. All right, so now we need to actually get the poem. This is just going to set up our credentials for AWS to talk to DynamoDB, or rather to talk to anything at AWS. We can refactor this a bit because it's sort of repetitive, but at the moment, we'll just leave it like this. Okay, so to get a poem from the database, you know what? Let's see if Code Whisperer knows what to do. Totally knows what to do. All right, so we're going to accept it. Why not? Let's just try it out. Table name. That's not right. It's close, but that's not right. Key map. That's close to. That's right. I don't know if we need. Yes, we need that. Now it's thinking. All right, it got pretty far actually. Cool. So and it gets this thing called get item output. We'll talk about that in a moment. All right. So first of all, like it got us pretty far, but it's not quite right. So the table name actually comes from our environment variable, right? So our environment variable in this instance, we go back to AWS, and we look at our environment variables. We need this thing, poems table name. Right? We don't want this, we just want the environment variable name. Okay, so let's just put that here in a comment for a moment. All right, let's say, let's go here to Amazon Q and ask Amazon Q, how do I get an environment variable in Go? See if it works. If not, we'll just have to Google it. Okay, it did work. Okay, it worked a lot. All right, so let's see. os.environ or get env is even better. Okay, this is what we want. Okay, that was cool. So what we're going to do is get the table name. So let's call it table. And we are going to put in, it's already got it, poems table name. So I figured it out based on this comment up here. That's what we're going to do. And it's going to, if the table is empty, we can do that. So, oops. Okay, so we're going to return an error, poems table name not set. That's nice. And it's an error. You know what? Instead of a, oh, okay, it's good for now. So we'll leave it like that for now. So If we don't have an environment variable, it's going to fail here. All good. Okay, cool. And so now, instead of ID in here for our table name, that doesn't make any sense, we are going to put in table. So we should get our environment variable stored as table, and we're going to stick it in there. Now, to do this next bit here, I'm going to take a look at my notes real quick because I have this written down here. Okay, actually, it's close. All right, it's close. So we're going to copy a little bit of this here just to make things easier. All right, so this is what Code Whisperer gave us. It's not quite right. So I'm just going to put this in here instead. And then we're going to have an extra brace here. And then, oops. Ah. Okay, let's see if I just have to fix this up a little bit. What did I do wrong? Oh, I see. Okay, let me fix this real quick. Okay, no problem. I just wrote the wrong thing here. So I'm going to rewrite it. There we go. Oh, that's the wrong one. My bad. Now I know what I'm doing wrong. I had it right before. Actually, Code Whisperer had it right. And then I copied the wrong thing over top of it. So that's fine. And then this, instead of AWS string, I'm going to put the and table here. Okay, and then instead of out, let's call it poem. That's nicer. And our ID. So this here, the 123, is not what we want. We actually want to pass it in the ID that we're passing into this function. So let's put this as ID. Okay, so what are we doing? What happened? What did we just do? So we are getting we're getting a poem from the database by the ID. We have a comment. Cool. Let me pop that up for a second. So get env name returns an empty string if it's not available. That's right. So thank you for that. So yeah, if it's an empty string, we're going to log an error. That's how we know that we don't have the environment variable. So hopefully that'll work. And then down here, we're going to try and get an item from DynamoDB. So if it did work, we're going to send it our table name, and then we are going to add this one attribute, which is the ID. So we're just going to get it by ID. We're just passing in the ID that we're passing in through this getPoem function here. Cool. All right, so next thing we need to do is deal with what came out. So first of all, we can check for an error. Thank you, Code Whisperer. You're so helpful. Look at that. It already knows I'm trying to get a poem from the database. It made a little error message for me. That's very handy. And then this part doesn't make sense. So it helped a little bit there. And now we want to deal with this, with the actual poem. So let's assume we did get a poem back from DynamoDB. We need to return it somehow. So currently what we set up to do here is we're going to return a string. So what we need to do is we need to turn this into a string. So this is currently a get item output object right there. Okay, that's cool. You know what we can do actually? What do I want to do? Yeah, I want to marshal that, I think. Or unmarshal it. I always forget which is which. So let me bring up something here that will help me. Nope, not that. No, not that. Hold on a second. Okay. Where did I put that? All right, let's do this. Get item output. All right. DynamoDB, get item output. Okay. I'm just trying to decide what I want to do here with this poem. So let's hold on here. Let me just see if I can find this real quick. I'm just trying to remember where I put this thing. Oh, I know. Okay. I think I have this here. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, that's right. Okay, so there's a whole Marshall map thing with Go and DynamoDB. So I just have to look up how to use that real quick. Because I had yeah, DynamoDB attribute value thing, Marshall map. Here we go. Okay. Except it's unmarshall is what we want. Hang on, we're just going to Google some stuff here so I can figure out how to do this. Here we go. Okay, now I found it. I think I found it. Okay, so basically we need to create a struct for the thing that we're trying to retrieve. I think that's what I want to do. Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do, let's go up here and make a struct. Hang on a second. Cool. All right, so let's call it a poem struct. Whoa, it just knows what to do. Is that what I want? ID, string, JSON. It doesn't need to be JSON, but that's okay. We don't need a prompt in this case. All right, so it's close. We don't need this JSON bit, I think. Let me just make sure. Whoops, wrong tab here. Hold on a second. We want DynamoDB AV, which means I think means attribute value. All right, so let's put that in. Instead of JSON, it should look like DynamoDB attribute value, colon, and then the thing, ID. And we're going to do the same thing for this. This is where we're going to store the poem. Oops. Okay. I think that's going to be helpful. Okay, so now we have that struct. We need to, I don't think that's correct, but let's go check this. Okay, so I think now what we want to do is use this attribute value Marshall function. Yeah. Yes. Title. Um, oh, I see what this. Okay. Okay, so let's do something really silly here. So, let me just take a look at this documentation. Oops, wrong thing here. Okay. No, that's the wrong one. That's the old version. That's the old version. I'm just looking up documentation here and getting lost a little bit. So hold on, bear with me. How to consume, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. Maybe this is it. Okay, well, first of all, oh yeah, I was almost there. Okay, cool. Well, before I do it, so what I want to add is a yeah, actually, Code Whisperer was on the right track, of course. Thanks, Code Whisperer. All right, so let's do a if poem.item equals nil. We don't want to return that, but we want to return something more like an error message. Yeah, let's do it like that. Oh, we already did. Okay, blah. So basically, what we're saying here is that if we don't get any poems back, return an error. So we can put a message in here. I guess we don't have to, but I think it would be nice to do a reason why we're sending an error. Nope, poem found in the data. That's fine with me. Okay, cool. So if there's no poem, we're going to return that. If there is a poem, so we have our struct already defined, we are going to use this attribute value unmarshal thing. So here's what we do. Attribute value unmarshal map, and then we do poem.item. And yes, that's right, and poem. And then we need to check that error. Yes, that's right, check the error. Return error unmarshal. Yes, that looks good too. Otherwise, we are going to return something better than that. So hold on one second. Let's see if this works. Okay, attribute value, we need to import that. So let me Let me just go get that real quick. Cool. Okay, so let's do a go get this DynamoDB attribute value package. Okay, and so now we should be able to, there it goes. Let's see if it imported it correctly up here. Yes, attribute value is now there. Unmarshal map, poem.item onto, wait a minute, that might be wrong. At some point we need to test this code and see if it does anything. But for now, let's see if, oh, get item response. Bleh. I see. Okay, so this is wrong. So we need to create a poem. And let's not call it poem. Let's call this, because that's the same thing as that. That's fine to be that. Let's just call, let's make a struct, or let's make a type called, look at you. Okay, var poem. But I don't want to call it poem. Let's call it item, just so we're clear. This is getting silly. Okay. This should be item. Okay, that might work. And what is an item? An item is a poem. So instead of returning a string, we're going to return a poem. And then that way we can change these all to nil, I think. Right? Oh. Did I make it called a poem? Yeah. Can I return an empty struct? Not yet, because what am I forgetting? Oh yeah, I haven't declared it anything yet, so let's do that. All right, so up here, we're going to paste that there. Instead of returning nil, we can just return the empty struct. I don't know if that's good or not, but this is taking a while, so let's just try some stuff. And if it does work, we're going to return that item. Okay, so what have we done? Oh man, that was interesting. Okay, so I think we're doing something good now. All right, so let's just try this out. Okay, that makes sense to me. So let's do a get poem. So back down in our main function, let's check if we already have a poem. So let's say poem equals get poem by ID. Yeah, okay. Oh, I forgot my error. Let's delete some of this stuff. It went a little crazy. What did I just do? Oh, I see. Actually, it did kind of what I wanted to do, but almost what I wanted to do. So it's saying, yeah, if it's not getting a poem ID, return. No, that's not what we want to do. Okay. You almost figured out what I want to do, but not quite. All right, well, this is what I want to do. Sort of. If we don't, if we have an error, log fatal. Do we have something else called poem in here? Yes, we do. Okay, so let's not call it a poem. let's call it, because it's not a poem. Yes, it is. All right, let's do this. Let's call this new poem. All right. And we'll call this new poem as well. And we will call this new poem. See what happens here. Okay. Someone asks me if I'm writing a computer poem. Oh, cool. Yeah. It is not a computer poem exactly. It kind of is. It's a poem generated with generative AI, inspired by artwork. So, um, yeah, so it's going to grab some artwork from the Cleveland Museum of Art, uh, their open API, and it's going to use that to inspire a poem with generative AI, and we're going to create a poem, basically. So it is kind of a computer poem. All right, so I think this makes a little sense now. So we have a new poem idea here. So if we already have a poem in the database, so we're going to see if we can get a poem. If we get an error, that's okay. If we don't get an error, what are we doing? What am I doing here? Hold on a second. No poem found in the database, or any of these other errors. That's not exactly what I want to do, because let's see. I actually do want to know if there's no poem in the database. That's totally okay if there's no poem in the database. So I'm going to return. Yeah, so instead of this, I think we want to return nil. Okay, so that way this will get skipped over, and then we can take a look if we actually have the poem. So let's just do this for now. Poem dot, actually, let's do this. All right, if poem.id, that's not quite what we want, but that's okay. If poem ID equals empty string, no, let's just do for now. Let's just do that at the moment, just to test things out, because we haven't actually tested anything out in a while. Actually, let's do a fatal. Let's log a fatal error. Otherwise, we're just going to do everything the same. All right, let's try it and see if anything will work. Cool. Let's do a SAM build. Okay. Let's do SAM local start API. Give it a moment. Okay, it's working. So now we're going to try some stuff. All right, so let's go to a new terminal. Actually, you know what? Let's do this in the browser since we're on full screen anyways. And let's do ID equals, well, we can do anything, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And let's see what's happening on our resource not found. Error getting poem from the database operation. Get item, blah, blah, blah. Oops. Resource not found. Okay. That's not exactly what I thought we were going to see. Internal server error. Let's try this. Okay, let's try this here, just to try it again. And let's see. Okay, same thing, internal server error. And okay, so same error. Let's just make this a little bigger. Got a 400. So error getting poem from the database. There's our error message. Operation DynamoDB get item response error status code 400 blah blah blah. Oh, yeah. You know what? The reason is not that we didn't find the poem, is that it doesn't know the name of the database because up here, so here's that error message, error getting poem from the database. That's kind of misleading. It should be more like error, uh, let's do error talking to the database. Um, it's this thing here. So we're trying to get our environment variable, but that's not set on our local machine here at the moment, right? So let's kind of force it. So let's go to, this is the table name, right? And then let's go to here and we'll just do export poems table name equals that. Let's start our API again. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm just curious why that didn't come up. Maybe, All right, well, anyway, let's see what happens. Okay, got an error. But it's a different error. No poem found in database. Actually, I think that means it worked, believe it or not. So that particular error, no poem found in the database, is in our main function down here, right here, no poem found in the database. Okay, so what did we do? We tried to get a poem. It didn't find a poem, right? Which means we returned this probably. Yep. So we returned an empty struct, an empty poem. And then what we do is here, we're looking at that poem.id is empty, which means we did not find a poem in the database. And so what we want to do in this case is not log a fatal error, actually. What we want to do is all this other stuff. We actually want to go through the rest of the flow here. Yeah, and so if it's not equal, so if we do find, this is a little confusing. Yeah, if we do find a poem in the database, so if it's not equal to empty, that's when we want to actually return it. But we want to return the string part of it. So let me just copy this a little bit. And up here, what we want to do, if we do find a poem in the database, is we want to return, but we don't want to return poem, new poem. We want to return poem.poem. Okay, that actually might work. And then what it's going to do is, if it doesn't find that poem, we're just going to generate a new one. So let's put this comment up here because that's actually what we want to say. Wow, it's already 4:10. Okay, cool. All right, well, let's see. So this should work. It's not going to write a poem to the database yet. And let me get a real one. Hold on a second. From here. Ooh, all right, let's use this number here. And just make sure that, uh, let's put this somewhere fun. Um, just so that we save it here. Okay, let's leave it there. All right, so let's do sam build. Okay, and then let's do sam local start API. And then same deal, except we're going to use a real artwork ID. So it should not find the poem for that ID in the database. And because it's not going to find it, it's going to generate our new poem. So there it worked. It generated our new poem, except it didn't write it to the database. So now we need to write it to the database so that this whole thing makes sense. Okay, so uh, write the poem to the database. Okay, so so I think we want to make a new function called like add poem or create poem. No, let's just do it in line actually. You know what? No, let's do it right here. Okay. Okay, let's do not craft poem. Actually, we already have a craft prompt, right? I don't like that for that. So let's just write, let's just put poem. Okay, so, oh, okay. No, so we're gonna take a poem. We're gonna return, what are we gonna return? An error. Uh, okay. It's got everything in here we need it to give, but you know what? Oh, man, it wrote the whole entire thing. All right, but that's no fun. So we're gonna not accept that, and we're just gonna do our own thing this time. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Let's do return error, or sorry, return nil. Okay, so we need to do the same stuff here. We need to do this whole bit, copy and paste, and we can refactor this later, I think, to make it a little cleaner. And instead of return item, we don't need that anymore. We just need the error. Okay. So same deal. Set up the configuration to AWS. Oh, someone asked, what AI model is this using? Is it Gen AI? Yes. So we're using Anthropic Claude instance, using Amazon Bedrock uh, to work with that model. So there you go. Yeah, and so that we did that last week. So you can take a look at the how that works in the last week's session. But yeah, we're using Amazon Bedrock to send our prompt, and then Anthropic Claude is the model uh, that's being called. Cool. Thanks for the question. Okay, so let's write the poem to the database. So, okay, so I do have some notes for this bit. Hopefully that'll speed things up. I just have to find them. Yes, here it is. So we're going to use the put item function, and I just have like a little sample code here. All right, so this is really simple, except this bit should be different. We need the same thing we did here before. Let's just copy this environment variable for the table name. Let's fix that up a little bit. Get out of here. All right, I'm gonna turn Code Whisperer off for the moment. Let's just pause it. so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. All right, so um, what's wrong with this? Put item DynamoDB, put item input. Oh, yeah, no wonder. I had to put the table. All right, so we're not doing, obviously, these things here. We're just going to do two fields, ID, and that's going to be our actual ID, so we need to pass that in. I forgot to do that. So up here on the function definition, let's put in an ID as a string again, and the poem as a poem. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, so now put poem, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this still is wrong. Okay, so this, we just need to get rid of that. Okay. All right, and then this will be our poem. And the value is going to be not poem, but poem dot poem. All right, and then we're going to need to check the error for that. Oh, I have to actually write stuff now because I turned Code Whisperer off. If error not equal to nil, and we're going to do something really simple. So it's going to be return could not write poem to the database, something like that. And let's do our like %v error, just to be fancy. All right, so now we don't need an out. You know what? We can leave that. Ooh, like this. Okay, so if you actually don't want to do anything with the output, I don't think we need to in this case because all we're doing is writing an item to a table. You can use the underbar or underscore character in place of a return. So since we're not actually going to do anything with that, I'm just going to use the underbar character there. Yeah, I mean, you could like, if you were going to like deal with the response that this gives you in some way, then you might want to capture it. But in our case, we just want to know if it doesn't work, basically. Okay. Okay, so what happened? Oh yeah, you're not supposed to. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we just need to do it. So put poem. Okay, so down here in our main function, where's that? Down here. Write the poem to the database. We're going to do error equals put poem, and it's our new poem. Okay, so this is funny. We have to make a struct for this. We have to make a poem. Let's just call it for now poem p, and let's do p dot. What am I doing? I always forget the syntax for this. Why do I always forget this? Let's just leave it like this. This is the easiest thing to do. P dot ID equals ID. We have the ID. P dot poem equals our new poem, which is a string. And then here we're going to put P. Oh, we need the ID too. Why do we need the ID? Okay, come back to this. So actually, we don't need the ID. Yeah, I made a mistake. So up here, instead of, oh yeah, because we already have the ID. So we don't have to pass in, where's our put poem? We don't have to pass in the ID if we already have a whole poem. We can just put in poem.id. Oh, but it's got to be capitalized. Full caps, apparently. Okay, nice. And so that means in our function call down here, we can just pass it in P. And then let's just check our error. If error not equal to nil, we're going to log a fatal error for now. Just do that to make it simple. Let's put this comment up here. And we still return the same thing. So that's all the same. So this actually might be done. Let's just give it a try. And let me see what's going on over here. Nothing. Okay, cool. All right, so we built it. Let's try and run it again. Sam local start API. Whoa, something happened. Oh, there's still, oh, I'm still running Sam. Okay. All right, I have two. Let's close one of these guys. Okay, so let's do Sam local start API. There we go. Okay, now let's make another terminal. It's the same thing. So now we're going to actually write, what it should do is it should recognize that we don't have a poem, generate the poem for this artwork, store it in the database. Let's see what happens. Error. All right, what happened? Let's see. Oh. Invalid Lambda response. Lambda response must be valid JSON. Okay, wonderful. So where did that happen? Let's see. Um, that's interesting. Okay. Did I forget to, I built it. Yeah, I built it. It should be okay. I think I just have a bug. I made a mistake. So let's figure out what I did wrong. If we have the poem, oh, I see. Yeah, no, that should be correct. I think that's correct. Return, blah, blah, blah. That all looks good to me. Return nil. Yeah, that looks good to me. That looks, all right. Put poem, log fatal error, new poem. It never even got to that, did it? It never even got to generate the poem. So let's see, let's just try it again. See if we can regenerate that error. Okay, so let's make a new terminal. Let's send that same thing. Huh. Okay. I'm not getting an error message that makes sense to me. So, yeah, okay. And the function times out. So it's returning it way ahead of where it should be returning it. First of all, let me go and just check if anything got written to DynamoDB. Okay. No, I don't see any items. All right. All right. So there's a bug somewhere. I don't know where yet, but that's okay. So it's not getting to this writing the poem part. Um, I have a feeling it's this. Um, so let's comment that out and see if we're getting to here for some reason. Just a quick little funky debug here. Oops. Doo, doo, doo. It's taking longer, which is a good sign. Oh, and it actually generated the poem. Okay. So I think my logic is the problem here. So let's see. Uh, all right. So it ran the, here's a short poem. And so it created the poem. I just don't know why this gave it some trouble here. Because I don't see this OMG message. Unless I just don't see it here. Hold on a minute. Let me just look a little closer. Huh. Okay, we're going to come back to this. Let's see if it actually wrote it to the database just for fun. Um, yeah. Okay, well, that's cool. It wrote it to the database. So there's our item. So there's the ID. And then here's the actual poem saved in DynamoDB. Okay, so that's interesting. But we have a bug in our code. Um, okay, so because I commented this out, I just said skip. But it didn't do that. Okay. All right. Well, um, what am I doing wrong here? So return events poem dot poem. Yeah, that should work. I think. Because that's a string, right? Let me see here again. Let's just uncomment this for a second. Uh, basically what I'm saying is that if we search the database and we find that poem, I want to immediately return it just like that. But so I'm returning the poem and a status code 200 and nil. But for some reason, it didn't like this. I'm wondering if it's this. Oh, oh, you know what? Maybe it's the empty string. Ugh, but it wouldn't be an. It wouldn't even get to that. All right, I'm a little confused, obviously, but uh, let's try again. Let's see what happens. Everything else kind of worked, so this is promising. But there's something wrong with our return here. Oh, you know what? I think I have an idea. All right, I think maybe I closed. I lost our environment variable. Let me just try one thing just to see if I'm not losing my mind. All right, so let's see here. A while back, I did this export command, right? There it is. Let's do start local sam, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's running. Let's try. So theoretically, since our poem is in the database now, it should just come right back. All right. I don't know if it worked or not. It seemed like it took a while. Uh, no errors this time. Um, huh. So let's instead of logging a fatal error here, let's put a message. Um, let's say we already have the poem. Okay, let's stop this. Let's build it. And then let's run it. I just want to see if this sort of works. Then we'll quit for the day. All right, so let's see what happens. Okay, it came back. We already have that poem. It actually kind of worked. Okay, interesting. Um, yeah, that works. So look, if I uh, try to get the same poem, it should skip over all this stuff, get my poem, and return it, which it just did. Uh, if I give it a different poem or a different artwork, let's do that. Let's give it a different artwork, not this. Let's find a different ID number just for fun. Here's another one. Okay. So if we give it this for an ID, this time it should take a little longer because it's going to generate that poem. Came back, and now let's try and get it again. And I got an error. Okay. Okay, I think let's see. Yeah, I'm getting some funky stuff going on here. So I'm going to have to figure out what's going on. I'm not really sure what I'm doing anymore. Let's see. I'm not getting that. It's not getting that error. Okay. So I'm just going to have to learn a little bit more about what I'm getting back here from DynamoDB because I feel like, yeah, and then the function times out. Okay. It might be that. Um, anyway, okay. Okay, but anyways, what's nice though is that we're starting to build a cache of poems in our database. So if I run this now, I have 2 poems. Now I have this second poem about this other one, 130707. So the whole concept is I generate a poem, I save it to the database. The next time it gets requested, it should read it from the database, not generate a new poem. That's the idea. But I need to set up some ways of verifying that so that we know it's actually working. And there's obviously like a bug going on that I'm going to have to figure out, but it's all good. Um, we're actually did something. Okay. All right. Well, that was fun. Um, it didn't all work out exactly how I expected it to, but you know, that's what happens. Yeah, thanks. Good tip, showing context. Yep, exactly. So I think a good practice for context is to set it with timeout to avoid potential blocking. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I might take a look at that as well. So, we have some stuff to figure out for next time. But yeah, that was fun. So thanks for joining. Uh, we'll be here next week, I think. Take care, everybody.